On July 1941, the German High Command announced the beginning of a new phase in the war against Soviet Russia, one that called for the main efforts to be directed toward the encirclement of Smolensk. What followed was a month of bitter fighting, of which the first week of August proved to be both costly and decisive. For the Wehrmacht, the time had come to abandon any pretense of a lightning war and dig in for a long and bloody struggle against the determined Red Army. In this episode of Kings and Generals, we cover the sixth week of the largest invasion in history, Operation Barbarossa, as the battle at Smolensk reignited and the German army transitioned from rapid victories to grinding warfare. Hitler's orders seemed powerful, but the reality was often a different story altogether. He believed himself invulnerable, immune to misfortune, and superior to experience. On June, standing before the resplendent backdrop of the Kroll Opera House in Berlin, he declared confidently, "The Red Army has collapsed completely. There will be no more large-scale attacks this year." Yet reality painted a different picture. By the end of July, the Red Army had regrouped. They counterattacked, forcing the Wehrmacht to spread its lines of communication. Unable to break through Soviet defenses, the Germans found themselves entrenched in a quagmire, their supply lines strained, their troops fatigued, and the specter of a prolonged conflict loomed. In an attempt to address this, Hitler issued Directive 39 on July. It outlined a two-phase plan. First, the encirclement of Smolensk, achieved by pushing along three prongs. Then, a drive northwards towards Moscow with the goal of capturing the capital by October. But these directives were detached from reality. Supplies could not keep pace with the army's advance. A dispatch from General Guderian to the OKW revealed the situation. "Our troops are completely through with ammunition. Neither infantry weapons nor artillery can be fired more than 2 or 3 rounds per gun. Even the tanks have only enough fuel for 1 or 2 days. Our troops are exhausted and demoralized after their tremendous advance and require a rest. If we do not get supplies, then it is no longer a question of supplying my troops for further operations, but of supplying them with sufficient food and ammunition to enable them to exist." Soviet mobilization and manpower edge. While the German forces faced mounting challenges, the Red Army was undertaking an impressive mobilization of its own. Soviet leaders had learned from the previous month's debacle. The catastrophic retreat from the borders saw an estimated loss of some 300 tanks and over 300,000 men, many captured, others dead. On July 1941, Stalin addressed the extraordinary sitting of the Supreme Soviet. It was a stirring call to arms that set in motion the largest human mobilization in history. The decree decreed that every able-bodied male between 18 and 50 would be eligible for military service. The nation's women also answered the call, filling vital roles in factories, farms, and the military. It was an effort to harness the full potential of the Soviet Union's staggering population. Within 2 weeks, some 2.4 million men had been drafted. With the Red Army having lost nearly a third of its force, the influx of fresh troops bolstered its ranks, although most lacked prior training and equipment. The Soviet manpower advantage began to materialize on the battlefield. One German report noted, "A few days ago, the enemy withdrew from the fighting. When he retreated, he left behind large numbers of baggage and motor vehicles. In the rear, one sees always enormous numbers of Russians marching along the roads and railways. Even entire families with children are being moved away from the danger zone. The enemy seems to want to throw away as many men as possible." The struggle for Smolensk reignites. As the Soviets massed troops near Smolensk, they made a tactical decision to reopen a pocket, a bold move designed to relieve pressure on the city and disrupt German communications. It was a gamble that paid off, forcing the Germans to commit more resources to securing their flanks. German forces quickly found themselves pulled into a second battle of Smolensk. And with the Soviets occupying stronger defensive positions than before, the cost in lives and material became exponentially greater. The once fluid offensive had transformed into a deadly attritional fight. A German staff officer later recalled, "We were now up against an enemy who wanted to fight, and we had to admit that his attack was strong and well prepared." Hitler's strategic shift, Ukraine and Leningrad. As the stalemate around Smolensk persisted, Hitler shifted his focus, convinced that victory lay in the south. On July 29th, he issued Directive 40, which outlined a dramatic change in strategy. 3 army groups would be formed, each led by experienced generals. Army Group B, under Maximilian von Weichs, would push through Ukraine towards the Sea of Azov. Army Group A would remain under Gerd von Rundstedt and continue the drive towards Moscow. Army Group C, newly created, would be tasked with the crucial mission of capturing Leningrad, a key strategic objective that, if successful, would cripple Soviet morale. Each army group was granted autonomy to pursue its objective, a significant departure from previous directives. However, this flexibility was deceptive. The overall strategic goal remained unchanged. Despite the logistical nightmares and the mounting casualties, Hitler was still fixated on Moscow. The siege of Leningrad takes shape. Army Group C, tasked with the critical mission of capturing Leningrad, faced a formidable challenge. Spearheaded by the Second Army under Maximilian von Weichs, the offensive commenced on August 1st. The target, the vital Soviet city of Leningrad, home to Russia's imperial past, and now a major industrial and military hub. The road to Leningrad was fraught with obstacles, both geographical and military. As the German Second Army advanced, the terrain became increasingly treacherous, hindering their progress. The Germans struggled to navigate the vast swampy expanse of the Volkhov River basin, slowing their advance and straining their supplies. Simultaneously, fierce Soviet resistance stiffened along the Neva River, forming a barrier between the advancing Germans and the city's outskirts. Notable engagements included the heroic stand at the Sinyavino Heights, where Soviet forces successfully repelled repeated German assaults. The specter of a protracted siege loomed, a prospect that did not sit well with Hitler's expectations of swift victories. Uman pocket closes. In the south, the battle for the Uman pocket drew to a close with the last pockets of resistance crumbling on August 6th. For the Soviets, it was a catastrophic defeat. Of the 450,000 soldiers trapped inside the pocket, only 20,000 were able to escape, a stark testament to the ferocity of the German attack. The remaining 430,000 fell victim to German firepower or were captured, marking it as one of the largest instances of POW capture in military history. But this triumph came at a significant cost to the Germans. They poured a staggering 300,000 men into the assault, depleting their ranks and stretching their supply lines. Moreover, the destruction of nearly 1,000 Soviet tanks highlighted the escalating toll on German resources. The Uman victory was a double-edged sword, a Pyrrhic victory that drained German strength and foreshadowed the challenges ahead in subduing the resilient Red Army. As the first week of August drew to a close, the German blitzkrieg had ground to a halt. The country's military machine, once invincible, now faced a sobering reality. Their dreams of a quick war had evaporated, replaced by the grim prospect of a long and arduous conflict. The Red Army, though bruised, was far from broken. Its vast manpower reserves continued to pour into the battle, rearming and redeploying with astonishing speed. The Germans found themselves locked in a struggle not just for territory, but for sheer endurance. Hitler's insistence on seizing Moscow by October added to the pressure, pushing his generals to adopt ever more audacious strategies. But as the boggy fields of Western Russia attested, the true nature of the war had changed. It was a war of attrition, and the odds were increasingly stacked against the Germans. What do you think? How will the German army react to the increased pressure and tighter deadlines set by Hitler? Will the Red Army capitalize on its manpower advantage? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss our coverage of the 7th week of the largest invasion in history, Operation Barbarossa, next week. Thank you for watching. We shall see you again soon.